Hey there, guys. I'm Rain Grim here for another fabulous session of PokeProfessionals. We currently have Zins here with us, who is going to be helping us out with making an amazing new Pokemon character and telling us a bit about his projects. Go ahead and tell us a bit about yourself.
Well, I go by Captain Zenescuel online, usually just Zens or Zenescuel. I'm mostly able to be found on Blue Sky Captain Zenescuel dot bksky dot social. Um, as far as myself, I've been I've been playing in the TTRPG scene in a pretty long time. I started in 2006 when I was in high school. And I've always had a big interest in it. So
Well, then we'll have to get that started. For anybody that's going to be interested, we're going to have links to their socials and any fun project they talk about down in the description. We're going to start off with something fun. What kind of trainer do you want to be?
So I've always so it's been a while since I played a Pokemon game, but I've always had a big affection towards water type Pokemons. They've always been my favorite. Mudkip in particular, though I enjoy the others as well. I know it's a little odd. I know it seems like a lot of people have prefer like other ones, but that's just always been mine.
What's that? What's that
Um,
thing? 7 out of 10. Too much water.
it's been a while. Like I remember there was a bunch of memes about Mudkip back in the day, but it's just
Mudkip is actually
it,
really, really good, and not gonna lie, I think I can make you a pretty cracked Mudkip. So let's give
I
this
mean,
one a
that's
shot.
fair.
We'll start
I
with
mean,
Mudkip
one
then.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that's nice about I remember when like as Mudkip evolves, you get at least I'm not sure about the game, but I know in the original game, like one thing that's nice about Mudkip is it evolves to water ground, so it becomes immune
Mudkip
to
starts off as
electricity.
water ground.
Really, I for some reason I thought
No,
the
no, you're
that
right.
came
Mudkip
at the
does start off
second.
with water, but it does
Yeah.
in this game start off with an ability called Mud Dweller, which automatically gives it ground resistance.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that it makes it a lot weaker to grass, but grass is kind of rarer than electrical, so seems a little stronger,
pretty sure.
strong combo.
So while I start making you an absolutely cracked Mudkip, why don't you tell us about some of your recent projects? Anything neat that you've been working on?
So for me, I mostly have been working on one project most of my time. It's called Starlight Journals. It's a sci-fi role-playing game. It definitely leans more complicated. It's to the same sort of like design degree as like your larger games like your Pathfinder, your D&D. It's designed to be a lot more. It's not completely flexible. I do have a world built around it, but it is kind of my own project. I'm currently doing a big rebuild right now. Not a full rebuild, but I'm wanting to like get that last step to something that I feel comfortable releasing because there's just so much to it. So I want to make it like as nice as possible without wasting all of my life on it.
Kind of going around kicking the tires, seeing what parts you want to keep, what parts might need a little fiddling, and what parts are like that
Mm.
needs to go, kind of deal.
Yeah, kind of that way. Like the whole impetus for it was I was converting everything to Affinity Publisher, and when I was working on it, I was noticing some efficiencies and basically started digging into it more. Not everything's going in this rebuild. There's a lot of things that just stayed the same, but it's always good to like clean up the writing, clean up stuff for clarity and all that kind of thing, as well as like something basically I'd been patching things piecemeal for a while, and this allows me to do something holistic. So everything is on the same level.
I mean, makes sense. Uh, can you tell us a bit about what that game actually like plays like? What I know you said like Pathfinder and stuff like that. What really was the impetus behind that game? What kind of goal or theme were you trying to like replicate the fantasy of it?
So the reason I decided to make the game was kind of like multi-layered, but like the first game I played is kind of go like if you just give me open for it, I'm just gonna wander off here. But basically the first game I played was Warhammer Dark Heresy.
Hmm.
That was my first TTRPG. Not like basically most people are like 3.5, 2E, that kind of thing. For me it was Warhammer Fantasy. So my game's a D100 game because that's something I really like. I like D100s, but it's a lot more focused on active rolls. So, like, if you say get attacked in combat, you can roll to fire back, and if you beat the enemy, you hit them, they don't hit you.
Oh,
And there's a lot more active defense and active involvement, even when it's not your turn. Um, a lot of my impetus basically came down to things I did. like in other systems, or things I didn't see um, service in other systems. Like it's more sci-fi because fantasy's heavy thing. It's not like grim dark like a lot of sci-fi is. Back then, it was definitely true, and it's still true. Where it definitely, a lot of the sci-fi tends to lead towards dark oriented stuff,
Hmm.
and I wanted something more optimistic, essentially. Not like full on utopia, but like something that's not completely negative either.
What's that thing that's like it's like hope punk or solar punk is like a thing now where it's like I'm trying to remember if that's the vibe.
There's some of those, but it's definitely not in that.
Hmm.
It's a lot of like older like space opera stuff, like Star Trek and that kind of thing.
Hmm.
I know Star Trek was a major influence for a lot of my design. So is, oddly enough, a game called Free Space, but that was a lot more in like the aesthetics of like space travel and stellar combat. Um, Definitely influenced. There's also just it's just everything I have ever liked has been sort of like put in there in some way.
It's kind of funny. And
Um,
one of the last one I did this, I talked about how like the person who's building their game, it's basically just taking all those things you like, filing off some serial numbers and just throwing it into a blender and seeing what you can get away with.
yeah, yeah, I know. I know one game that I really like. It's a war game called Infinity, and a lot of its like design decisions, like in terms of mechanics, or stuff that I decided to pull from. It's very different because it's a D20 and my Z100,
Hmm.
and like it's a obviously war game, so like it's going for a perfect balance. Whereas like I'm not like in TTRPGs, you want it balanced enough that no one feels left behind, but you don't need perfect balance. You don't need everything to work exactly. Sometimes it's fine if the players figure out a cracked combo. Like
Well,
not everyone's going to do that.
there's a funny thing in games where like everybody assumes balance is this perfect thing that happens for every system when really, like with almost everything in the world, there's an area of gray where that's going to adjust depending on what you're doing. Balance for one game is going to be completely skewed for another. Like
Oh
stuff you
yeah.
get away with in Honey Heist is not the same kind of balance you're going to have in like a war game. There's going to be different goals you're trying to do to facilitate that fantasy. That's the way I like to think of it, at least.
No, I completely agree with that. That's completely how I view the whole situation. Like I said, I think the most important thing is enough balance that everyone feels like their role is valued without feeling like they left behind or are pointless, but but otherwise you can leave it a little flexible. I think one thing about my game that does lead me to balance things a little more is that everything the players can do, the enemies can do.
Hmm.
So if a so there's always that like level of like I don't want to give the players certain tools because players wouldn't want to use them against them.
I have a GM right now that's currently coming into that where they don't quite realize that every time they give us something that's even bigger, they then have to find a way to make it so that's a challenge for us because they just gave us
Mhm.
something even bigger. It's like, oh, what's that Darla Dimple song from Catch Don't Dance? Like big and loud. It's just like, you can now shoot explosions from your finger as a bonus action. It's like, great. Now we have to deal with enemies that can handle that because the way the game is balanced.
uh, Yeah, that is just how it is sometimes. Like if you give everyone too much. That's actually one thing one of the main reasons for my rewrite is balancing levels of play. That's one thing I really liked about Pathfinder 2e is just everything is sort of balanced. It might be a little intense in Pathfinder 2e, but it works really well for what it's doing. And I've never had a problem with it, but it definitely gives a better idea what you should expect when you're going through it. And I'm trying to get a little bit of that in, but it can't be the same thing.
I mean,
My
that
system's
makes
just a lot.
sense. Yeah. Uh,
The numbers just wind up bigger.
Speaking of numbers, um, we're getting to the fun part where you actually make who your guy. Now, we already got
Mhm.
you a really cracked mudkip. I made them pretty slow, but they're gonna like rocket out of the gate with some high damage.
Mm.
What kind of trainer do you think would have that kind of mudkip?
Um, Definitely probably someone who'd be on the stronger side, uh, more athletic or combat oriented. We're kind of talking about surfer, I think.
I think a surfer
Before,
would fit that vibe, just like
yeah,
that. Yeah, bro, don't start shit.
yeah,
Here comes
exactly.
Skippy. Uh, I think I got a good.
Uh,
I'm assuming you'd want to be in there and like assert yourself if something went wrong, right?
oh yeah, yeah, definitely.
I think I
Especially
got.
if it's going slow, sometimes you need to step in.
There's actually a class in Pokemon Tabletop United called Athlete. That's the perfect vibe for that.
Mm.
All their stuff is just like
Oh yeah.
boosting themselves up and then like going in and just walloping some stuff. So I'll start with that then. And then type ace water, which I think would work pretty well for you. While we're talking about that, you just were talking about how you've been going through your system again. Um, how the have you been doing any play tests with that? And if you have, like, do you have any fun little neat stories from the process of that?
Um, well, I playtest my game regularly. Like my it can be both like a boon and a detriment where I am always playtesting the game with people. It helps me keep me motivated, but it also means that I always have to keep my game in a somewhat playable state. Like I do a regular playtest every Monday. I used to do Thursday, but I just don't have the amount of time I can do that. But uh where we asked, did you want to know about any like specific events from the playtest?
I was kind of
Like
curious, like,
things like that?
when you're doing playtesting, I'm actually just kind of curious, like, what kind of like things do you think are important when you're doing a playtest? Like, I know we hear a lot of like oh god, they found that there was this wording that made it so they could have bazooka because of this. But like, are there things like that that you've found during playtests that just kind of like, oh, this is why you playtest. This is the stuff you're trying to find out ahead of time.
I think the thing about playtesting, at least for my game, because I've been making it for a really long time, is that it tends to be less like little wording errors because like I can just be like, if I'm the GM, I can just be like, that's not how it's supposed to be. We're missing a word there. I'll fix it. We'll move on. But like that's just proofreading stuff.
Yeah.
The real thing is like game feel and
Mm.
like getting input from people like, hey, this doesn't feel very good, or I didn't like that aspect, or I'd like if this aspect was better. Like one of my playtesters was running a hacker character and felt really like they had to spend a lot of money, but they weren't really like doing as much as any of the other characters. They're spending a lot less. And talking with them really helped me give an idea like what was missing from their builds and like the things to make their build cheap enough where they felt competitive with the other players. Not competitive, but more like they felt relevant.
On the same level.
Is probably a better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a thing I've discussed a lot of times where like when you're playing in a game, you want to feel like you have that niche where you're necessary. Like often in a game, if you have, I think we've all played with that play group where there's like that one person that like built their character to just be so overwhelming that you're just sitting there going, why am I here? I'm just here to
Yeah.
clap. So it's really important when you're designing characters and their options. Like there needs to be a balance met between this is obviously a trap feature, so people feel smart that they avoided it. But you also need things where it's like there's enough good in there where it's like, okay, they're actually viable. Like so with the hacker you were discussing, what did you end up finding was like the thing you needed to do to fix that?
It was actually several different things. Basically, one thing is like kind of it's like three different things. First of all, I made it where it was more valuable to them to improve their computing device. Basically, the better computer, the faster it could go, the more device it had, the better their time would be. Second, they things need to be cheaper. So rather than programs being bought all a la carte, your combat hacks could be bought in a program slot, which
Hmm.
was a lot cheaper than buying individually. So they could get a good suite of basic like hack powers um, without having to spin an arm and a leg. And then third, I made it where the hacks themselves were not all just basic normal actions. Some of them could be pulled off as smaller actions that could be done quicker. So they could do like a main big hack and a smaller hack on the side. So it gave them more flexibility in combat.
Dual programming kind of
So
deal. There's like a side thing handling it.
yeah. Yep. Program is actually a skill in the game. So like program is more than just hacking in combat. Like
Hmm.
you out of combat hacking, and you can also do like you just program things because not all programs are designed to just be like hacking programs. You can Some of the programs are like you got your guys' scanner, they have a program on their device that combines with it so they can like figure out what an enemy has as
I
their
meant to say
gear.
processing, not programming. That was on me.
Oh, okay.
Dual processing. There's two things happening at the same time. That was on me. No, I'm
Oh,
not a
okay,
computer
okay.
guy. Apologies to all the people that watch my videos. I'm getting better slowly. Obviously, my audio is not quite up there. If anybody wants to donate money to my Ko-fi, I'd really appreciate it. A new mic would be very nice. This thing is very much broken.
All right.
Speaking of
I
stuff like
s-
that, though, just because we're discussing skills and programming,
mm,
we actually need to discuss your character skills. So
hmm.
I will let you know for the thing I'm building, you will need good athletics. I was
Oh
thinking
yeah,
that you
of
might
course.
want some good combat as well. Does that sound pretty on par for what you were after?
Yeah, yeah. The combat sounds reasonable unless there was going to be
So,
more moving around stuff.
well, the
So,
cool
but
thing
combat's
is,
probably the good.
combat in this game is less about attacks because you're actually getting attacks with the athlete thing. We're gonna get to that in a second.
Mm,
But combat in this thing is more like actual like abilities, like grappling, knocking people over, like
mm.
anything you could think of like a martial artist doing that stuff before you even get to like the punchy Pokemon drain punch kind of deals. On that note, though, what do you think you would be bad at?
Well, probably any sort of like really weird esoteric education
Okay.
um,
Yeah, I
would
don't really
probably
think your
not be
surfer
something.
dude is sitting there with like a planchette doing a Ouija board in the middle of the night.
And then I'd say probably also he doesn't really have the great intuition. I kind of think he's kind of some
A little,
does
yeah.
whatever he wants to at a moment's notice, whether that's a good idea or not. Um,
Every group
and
needs
the,
that person that pushes the button. Just saying.
yeah, no, you gotta have him. And then I'd probably say like the way he talks doesn't really make him particularly intimidating.
Are you going
Like,
for like the full, just like, bro, how's it going? Like that.
bro.
It's
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
okay.
exactly. Yeah, exactly.
I'm not
Full
gonna lie,
on.
surfer bro is one of my favorite tropes just because it's one of the least offensive tropes where it's just like, you get a surfer bro, it's like, cool. They're gonna be good to vibe with. They're good for the house.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
I
That's
will.
why I like him too.
They're pretty tight.
I've been I've been doing meathead characters in TTRPGs a bit more recently. I've been having fun with it. So
I have too. I've usually been segmented into the role of like group dad, and it's nice to have like that authority, I guess,
mhm.
but it's also so much pressure, and it's also like, great, I can't let myself loose because I have to make sure you guys survive, and that gets annoying very fast. That
Mm.
actually leads me into another little topic while I'm doing this. Um, we were discussing like themes and what you want, the fantasy you want of your game. When you're designing your game for all these different like skills and processes, was there anything that you tried to design specifically in the rules to help progress that fantasy, like backed by it, or is it all kind of like led by the world building that the GM does?
So I basically my idea is that when I was making my game is I want it to be very free. People should be allowed to make their own builds. You're not stuck in a class. You essentially are given a bunch of starting options. You can build from there. But I do generally like try to make sure that your normal like sci-fi fantasies that people might have, like the smuggler or things like that, are builds that you can definitely go from. Now, mind you, your GM's world building would influence what makes sense. Like if you are, I don't know, frontier explorers, like a space cowboy might be something you might be encouraged to make. Whereas probably a little less, you'd probably see a lawyer or someone with a little more, like I don't know, a newer detective type would probably be
Hmm.
less present and that kind of thing. Unless you want to do like a space cowboy accent.
I mean, that could work. um, so to divert from that one just a little bit, because I know you're still in the process on that one and still being worked through.
Mhm.
What what other projects are you currently working on? Is there any like fun thing that you've been like playing with, or
Like something I'm building or like TTRPGs I'm playing.
Either one, honestly.
Um, so I kind of bat around several projects in the background. Sometimes I'm not as uh normally I try to keep focus on my subject, but sometimes it's good to like work on something else and then go back to it.
Hmm.
Probably my big other project is sort of is working with my fantasy setting
Hmm.
and the systems for it because it wouldn't have this like I want to use like a similar system, but like you're not gonna have programming in a setting without any programmable machines, and the way magic works in my fantasy setting is very different from psychic power.
You're not
So
gonna
like
have a
you'd think there'd
Minecraft
be
thing.
overlap, but it's not the same at all.
Yeah.
At least in how it's set up. Like uh, I guess just to get the world building stuff, like in Scarlet Journals, anyone can be psychic. It's basically just a skill you can train. You just need the right tool, a cyclic amplifier, and you can do it. That's all you really need. Whereas magic in my fantasy setting is much more something that you random chance dictates if you can cast magic, if you're not a divine caster.
Okay.
Because essentially in the setting, to protect people's souls, their souls are sort of gated off. So only special people who have like sort of a crack where some of their soul energy can get out and they can use that for magic can actually cast magic. Otherwise, magic is just sort of like because it's your soul energy, it's meant to be protected. So only very few people have the right like soul to make it work. But it's completely random. It's not genetic or anything. Nobody knows when a font, as I call it, is going to be born. So
If that's the case, is there like typically like a big thing where it's like, oh god, they can do it. We should go seek them out kind of vibe, or is it more like, oh god, then we need to push them out of the group kind of thing, or is it in between?
it depends on the culture they're from. In like the human, so I didn't make humans the primary culture, and like each, they are a seafaring race that primarily lives in like, islands and that. I modeled them I'm still working on exact details, but they're basically meant to be like a combination of like Polynesian cultures and Italian city-state culture, like kind of like mixed together.
Hmm.
Um, but like their idea is that they are guardian by the um, goddess of knowledge. So like if they find someone magic, they are enrolled in magic academies and learn magic, sort of like a scientific a discipline.
Gotcha.
Whereas like people who are born the in a more like traditional like kind of like medieval fantasy people who are called Retki Volk.
It's okay. It's
Uh,
not like a recording. You're good.
the the Retki Volk are they generally view magic with a lot more distrust. So generally speaking, if you're born magical, you either need to hide it or you need to be inducted as an apprentice to a court sorcerer. Because unless the magic is controlled by a like seen as an authority, like a proper authority, like a count or a dux, um, unless it's controlled by that, it's not seen as proper, seen
Gotcha.
as problematic. At least if it's not divine. Like if it's one of their clerics and their powers coming from their divine rather than an eternal source, it's fine. They
Gotcha.
don't
Okay.
because they feel like the gods are the ones controlling, but they feel like magic must be controlled. Whereas humans are a lot more like it's just studied. As long as you study it, it's fine. Uh, is basically their approach to it.
Makes sense. Like there's gotta be some interest in that because if it's just all magic is treated the same, then it's just like, what's the point of the differences? I
Oh,
guess that would make sense to me.
yeah, exactly. I feel like it's interesting. Like the whole setting is set up around like basically the world almost ended because the gods were gone, and so they set up a god pact. But as part of that, magic left the world, so a lot of the species had to change. And there was a
Okay.
god for each species who made them into who they are. So, and the gods. basically how they like feel about magic affects how their people feel, essentially.
Okay. How many of those different types of deities do you think you have in your game, or is it not really concrete? It's more like a feeling.
So right now, I have there's the goddess of knowledge for humans. There's the goddess of life and the god of death for the Rekivolk. The There's several dragon style things. There's the drakes who have the god of might. There's the worms. They're a lot more like Naga people than like, uh, but it's worms with a Y.
Yeah.
They're the goddess of magic. There's like more lizard like dragon descendants who are called Shaj, and they are under the goddess of chaos. Though chaos is kind of non-indicative
Hmm.
because they view it more as the natural flow of the universe. Like they view their divine entity as one of justice and
Okay.
karmic balancing. So it's a lot more complicated than just chaos. They aren't just doing random stuff.
I
Because
mean,
I feel chaos can be complicated. And I don't think a lot of people appreciate
unless you're
that.
playing with a group of people who don't understand what chaotic mean.
Yes,
The amount of
exactly.
people I've met that thought chaotic just meant I'll do whatever I want instead of like the unknowable universe. We're not getting into that. That is a TED talk on its own right there. Not even on just
Oh yeah, 100%.
TTRPGs, just in general concept. Geez, we're not doing. I'm not doing this. I got to avoid that. Cut to here, just me doing a huge rant, screaming with a pen at a board.
Uh,
We're gonna do for
the
real
Pepe
quick just
Sylvia
to
meme.
do. It is actually time for you. A pretty interesting thing. This is something that you're actually gonna have to really dig into. It's not something I could do because it's choices. As athlete, you eventually get to take an option where you get to pick some moves that typically Pokemon use, but you get to use them.
Hmm.
So from the options you have at the start, it's going to be bind, block, slam, and strength. Bind is going to be just a 1 second. Let me pull this up real here. Right, you automatically got rock smash just because you got basic martial arts. I figured you need something as a good casual. So bind
Mhm.
is going to be a static ability where basically you're just much better at grappling people, which is why you took combat, and you do damage to people when you have them grappled, and that's just always
Hmm.
on. So you don't actually have to use that move, but it's there. Then some of the other options are block, which I believe.
That raises defense, right?
What do you say?
That raises defense. Or...
Uh, no, not in this one. This makes the
Hmm.
target stuck and trapped. Basically, you're blocking them off. I can see where the logic is coming from now.
Okay.
Basically, this one
Yeah,
makes them
yeah.
so they can't escape. You're just pinning them down. Alrighty, and then the other two options are slam and strength. They're basically two different types of attack move. 1 second, I put an extra space behind slam and it didn't understand it. The Excel sheet is very helpful for running this game, but it is very type sensitive. But whoever made this sheet had to have sold their soul to make it work this way. Of the two left, there's Slam and Strength. They both have the same damage base, which is basically how much dice you roll for damage.
Hmm.
The difference is one is at will and has a much lower chance of hitting, but it does give you Smite if you charge somebody. So basically, if you run up to somebody before you do it, it gives it the Smite keyword,
Hmm.
which means even if you miss, it deals half damage. Or
Hmm.
you can take Strength, which you can do every other turn, much easier to hit, but it does not have that big like bonus to it, and its
What's
special
the
attack is
difference to
pushing
hit on them?
somebody. What do you say?
What's the difference to hit with them?
So you have an option in these character things. The way it typically works is you're going to roll a die. It's going to be a d20, and you have to get over the AC of your move and the opponent's evasion. So if it's an AC 6 and their evasion is 3, you have to roll above a 9. If it meets, they win. On defender wins on ties in this system.
Hmm.
So you're basically having to hope you roll higher than a 9. The other one
Hmm.
is 2. So basically, I'll put it this way. Let me pull up your mud kit for you, just because I didn't get to do this
Hmm.
last game. It's in the videos, but I don't know if people watch my videos yet. Your
I have
evasion
watched a
is
few of them.
0 for speed because it's below a certain point, but your defense evasions are both 2. So if somebody did a physical attack against you, you would use your defense evasion, which is 2. And so you'd be 2 plus whatever the AC of their move was, and they'd have to roll over that. In this game, it's
Okay, so you
much easier to hit things because it's a
yeah,
Pokemon
that's
style.
fair.
You want the back and forth.
Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, it's a 20% difference. I'd probably go with strength.
You probably go with strength. So
Yeah,
you do get to pick from the other 2 options. So there's bind and block as well. I feel
let's go
like you
with
might go
block.
bind because your guy is
Oh,
gonna be like one
really?
of those big old surfer dudes. I think grappling is probably in his
Okay, okay.
wheelhouse.
Let's go with blind then. Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to go with bind and strength. While I'm doing that, we're reaching the tail end of me making your character sheet. So I'm actually going to go into something about your game system. When it's coming to the system, like that's relatively easy. What steps have you taken for like getting players ready for play in that system? Building the character sheets, building all the accessible material, stuff like that.
Mm. So it's one of those processes that is can be difficult. I have
Yeah.
tried to create a fairly automated sheet that works pretty well. And I think it works well. It's just one of those sheets that's unfortunately not totally self explanatory. Everything works well if you use it right. However, it's not completely self explanatory. So it's kind of like,
This is
and
why
I'm not,
designers get paid to do their job, right?
I know. I would love to hire an actual designer to have a sweep at this, but I have to balance the money around I have for the project. Um, as I also have made it where you can just roll for a lot of your options. Now, it's not perfect because I did want to have a lot of flexibility for players so they can be from a certain background but have some flexibility within it.
Hmm.
Um, but so you still have to make choices and options, but generally you can if you really wanted to, you could just roll
Just
most
roll
of
on the
the
chart.
yeah, just roll in the chart if you want to.
The quick play
Just do that.
options. Like we're doing a one shot. I don't care. Let's see what I get.
Yeah. I was gonna make sure to have pre-built characters
Hmm.
for one shots as well. Um,
Is that
actually, one
available
of
for a bit?
the on Blue Sky, the avatar I use is of a character in the game
Hmm.
named Koshi Rostic, who's meant to be more younger kind of character, and he's one of the pre-built characters that can be selected. He's more of like an athlete himself. He's a bit nimble, but definitely someone who just can smash through things. Like
Gotcha.
he has the bow that's shown in his art, but he also has a big axe that he
Okay.
uses as well. So
I think we're coming up on the end on the discussion. So I think we're reaching the tail end of making your character as well. Um,
okay.
cool thing is in your character sheet, you have the athlete. They automatically get to set 2 different combat stats to be +1. Basically, it's a multiplier that you get.
Mm,
Normally, only Pokemon get access to that, but you get access to that through your character.
mhm.
So we also have to do your stats. We already got all your
Okay.
skills. So the way this works is, let me swap over to this other thing here. You are going to have uh, 6 stats. You're automatically getting 2 points in HP from being an athlete, which bumps
Mhm,
your HP up from up to 48, which is pretty solid for a starter. And then you get
mhm,
to put roughly 5 points. You have 10 points to work with. You can only put 5 max in one stat. You
mhm.
have HP, attack, defense, special attack, special defense, and speed. Your character is an attacker that uses a physical stat. I would recommend putting some points in physical, but it's up to you where you'd want to put the rest. But you will be getting a
Okay.
multiplier in 2 different stats, so keep that in mind.
Okay. Okay. Do you think it's best to maximize the multiplier or
Um, do you want to hear my personal opinion or what I recommend as a game master?
I both? I'd
Game
say.
master opinion? Go with what your heart says. It's honestly about role playing, enjoying the
Mhm.
character, feeling what the vibe is. Player, min max the shit out of that. Personal
Is
recommendation
it
would be speed and your attack stat. Speed evasion can be applied to either types of attack rolls and status conditions. The downside is if you get hit by while using a speed evasion, or if you put a lot of points in speed, you lower your defenses, and if you have defense stats, you minus damage from that first. So if you put
Mm.
everything in speed and no defense, you're a glass cannon.
Yeah, I like the idea though. It kind of appeals to me to go heavy speed and physical
All
attack.
right, we can
So,
do that, and then we'll switch over to your combat page. Did you want to max out your attack and your speed evasion combat stages then? Well, not max out, add one.
mm, yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, that sounds good to me
So
based
it's a
on.
10, and it gives you +2 because of the multiplier. So it's basically point
Mm.
the 1/5 multiplier is how it works, and then it gets bigger the more multiplier you have. For example, if you had 6 combat stages in attack, it jumps to 22.
Oh, jeez.
As
Yeah,
somebody
that
that has
sounds good though.
recently gotten to that much multiplier, it's ridiculous.
All right, let's roll. Let's roll with that.
Honestly, let's give this a quick look. Your highest damage attack is 2d8 plus 10 plus 12. And the way the system works is if you crit, you roll an additional 2d8 and get an additional 10. That last number always stays static. So you can deal a hefty chunk of damage at the start.
Yeah,
And
just
let's take a look at your mudkip here. Oh, speaking of which, what do you want to name your character? What do you want to name your starter?
there's a book series I really like. One of the characters named Skippy. That seems like a really good name for a mud skip. So
For those that
it's
are
on my
watching, we
mind.
totally didn't have a flub and had to go back and edit this, and I don't know how it's going to work out. We'll find out in post. Oh, what do you want to name your trainer as well?
Uh, I think Theo. I had some historical names on my mind, but Theo's still like a good surfer.
So you're going with the Surfer Dude vibe. Describe what you think your character would be for this campaign. Like, my hope is that after this is done, I'm going to send you this character sheet and you can have it stored somewhere. And if you ever wanted to play in a PTU game, you have a character ready. Hopefully, the GM is okay with whatever character we made, but it's all legal.
Hopefully, hopefully. I kind of imagine him someone who just kind of drifts along in life almost,
Hmm.
but I mean that's kind of how a lot of surfers are. They tend to be kind of drifters in a way. Um, but someone who's like looking to have fun and out in the world to kind of experience it alongside his Pokemon.
Makes sense to me. I honestly like the vibe of surfer characters. I know we mentioned earlier, but just I think relaxed dude bros are one of the better characters to have in a group because they usually are just so willing to say, "Oh, we got to go do a thing. All right, let's go." They're more willing
Dude.
to engage with just stuff that happens. It's the Shaggy archetype without being
Oh yeah,
afraid.
exactly.
There's like,
Yeah.
we're going to go do a thing. I don't know. We're getting paid. Okay, I'll go along. It's really easy as a GM to work with the dude broad archetype. Uh, so I've made you a pretty phenomenal water type ace and athlete. Uh, Means that you can get up in the fray, or you can also just let your Pokemon handle everything. Your starter is going to be a very slow, tanky motherfucker. They have pretty high defenses, and they are a mixed attacker. They get both special and physical attack benefits. And there's a really cool thing in this game called Mixed Sweeper. Well, if you put stats in both attack and defense, or attack and special attack, you get extra points to spend elsewhere. Because in most games, you just want to focus on one stat. This one lets you split the difference. On that note, though, what would you like to like promote or advertise before we, close out on this? Is there any specific like things that's coming up soon for you that you want folks to keep an eye on? Places they can go and like see some of your projects, that type of thing.
Well, well, I have my current version of my game that you can utilize yourself to. On my Blue Sky, you can get access to it. It's through a Google Drive.
Hmm.
And I'm planning to have my full rebuild out sometime this year. I'm already more than halfway through it, so it's looking pretty good on that front. So you should be looking out for that in the coming months.
Is that going to be on the Google Drive as well, or are you going to be using something like Itch.io or Drive Through RPG, something like that?
This one will also be most likely through either Google Drive or another link, just something nice and free you can get access to,
Hmm,
because the full version will probably involve art and redesign and that kind of thing.
gotcha.
this isn't. This is like you could basically say like it's close to the final version. It's not quite there.
It's like beta 2.0.
Yeah. That's a
You're
good way to put it.
almost there. There's still like a couple things
Yeah,
that needs textures applied, that kind of deal.
yeah, proofreading that kind of thing. So,
Proofreading's the important one. As somebody that recently got to read through somebody's system, and it's like, oh man, so that doesn't mean what you think it means. You need a comma there, or bad stuff happens. Uh, your system for explaining how like stats are done, you need parentheses because that's how math works. Uh, I recently got to work
I.
with the folks that was doing Hellborn, and we
Hmm,
realized during character building for, I believe his name was like Tentacle or something, which is funny. I'll have to find it's like Swamp Guy or something like that. We
mhm.
were building characters and we had them there with us, and I explained how math worked. And he's like, "Oh, that's not how the stats are supposed to work out." I was like, "Well, that's how the math works out because you need parentheses."
Yeah, I know I'm doing something education and stuff. I'm just like just to be safe. Let's use parentheses,
You cut
even
out
if
a
I
little
don't
bit
need
there,
it.
but I think we got it.
Okay. If I need to
But
repeat, just
no,
let me
you're good. But it's just at the end of the day, there's a reason that you proofread. I think one of the funnier
know.
ones is they apparently had left in stuff for some of the weapons that was in like an old version, and they forgot to like search document remove. So certain guns had keywords for things that they got rid of apparently like 2 or 3 versions ago, and they
Yeah.
just didn't think of it.
Oh, it actually reminds me of a really funny story about where they released the wizard
Oh, I know
thing.
this one. Please
Yeah.
tell this story for the audience. I would love this
So
one.
I don't have the full context, but basically one of the D&D second editions, probably the first one, they went through and changed mage to wizard, but they just did a blanket control F replace, but they didn't make sure it was just the word. So damage appears a lot, and it has the word mage in it. Got turned into wizard, so it's
So it's
the
the
wizard.
wizard. The wizard damage. Or not even the wizard damage, just the wizard. They take
Yeah, you do
16
1d10 to
the
wizard.
wizard damage. Or the wizard fire the
Yeah,
wizard. Jesus,
exactly.
I'm fucking it up at the end. This is why I normally don't do stuff live, guys, because I'm gonna make these mistakes. But you know what? I'm leaving this in just so you can see how this works out without it being edited. You know what? I'm putting this whole one up is just what it is. They're gonna see all of our mistakes. They're gonna see everything. This is behind the scenes. On that note, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. It was a lot of fun chatting with you. I'm actually very interested in your system. I'm going to make sure for anybody that was listening that that's going to be down in the description down below. Click on it, share it with some friends, give some feedback. Polite feedback. I'm watching you guys. Polite feedback.
Constructive feedback.
We need constructive feedback. Just saying, oh, I didn't like it doesn't help as much as you think. On that note, guys, I'm Rain Krim. This has been PokeProfessionals, where we build a little character, talk about some world building, talk about systems, and get to know some of the cool little professionals that are in the TTRPG sphere. Help if I said TTRPG net well there, but oh well. Anything to say on the way out?
Uh, well, not much, but y'all have a great week.
See you guys later. Talk to you later. Bye.